Good morning, everybody. This is Perry Gruber from Copiosis, and we are starting our latest live stream. Today, we're going to be talking about just adjusting the camera angle here, a fundamental philosophy behind Copiosis and why I put on our thumbnail the massive advantage we have over other organizations because of this fundamental philosophy. And I think it's time that we talk about this so that people understand where Copiosis is coming from and why we make some of the decisions that we make at Copiosis. And I have a couple of people joining me today, but before we get to the guests, they're people you're familiar with, I'm sure, because if you've watched any of our previous live streams, I just want to say that if you're interested in finding out more about Copiosis and you don't know about what our innovation is about, please go to this website and you can read all about it. And then also, for those of you who are familiar with it and want to know more about where the money goes, you can check out our budget at the Patreon page right there. And then finally, if you're new to the YouTube channel, I ask you to please subscribe and click that alert button so that you get the alert of all of the videos that we have scheduled, that we are scheduling, and any live streams that we schedule in advance, such as our Devil's Advocate show, which we've taken a hiatus on as Jill the Pill Dell is working on her garden. It's springtime, y'all. So, that kind of thing happens. Let me introduce my guests and then we'll get into it. So we've got in the middle of the screen with a beautiful camera setup, we have Michael Vick. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Perry.
And then off to my right, I presume that's your right too, our CTO, Gheric Speiginer, with his 20% charged headphones. We may have to do something about that in a few minutes, but he swears that the battery is going to last through the show. So that's awesome. Welcome,
hey,
Gheric. So Michael is here because he thought it would be, as far as I remember, Michael, you thought that it would be, oh, one quick thing. So anyone who's viewing live, because this is a little bit controversial, and I say it's controversial because we're going to talk about an aspect of what Copiosis is about that some leading organizations in our ecosystem would probably not agree with. And definitely the adherents of those movements are not going to agree with what we're going to talk about. So if you are watching the show live or recorded, please make comments in the comment section. We will answer everyone, or I'll answer everyone even after the show is over, because we really want people to understand where we're coming from with this philosophical approach. All right, that being said, Michael wanted to join because, as I recall, he was interested in participating in this call because you were curious about what we're doing from this perspective. Is that right, Michael?
That's right. So, obviously I have, my own philosophical and faith background. But even though, others might not share that background, I think that there's some dovetails that are interesting between, different perspectives on this. And, we had even in my first live stream with you, we had talked a little about the faith aspect of what we're all doing here. And so that has always been of interest to me in any political or socioeconomic work that I've been doing because of my background. So
great,
yes.
Great. Okay, super. And then Gheric, thank you for being here. Gheric, I really appreciate him being here because that means I don't have to carry all the water relative to what we're going to be talking about. Gheric has a lot of experience with our underlying philosophy. So why don't we just jump into it? And we don't have an agenda here, so we're going to kind of do this as an open conversation for the hour. And hopefully, if there are people who are watching and they want to participate in the conversation, just saying again, you can make your comments known in the comment section and we will respond to them during the live and then after the live if you have any questions about it. So, Gheric, would you like to start with our fundamental philosophy or would you rather I do it?
So, yeah, I'm not sure how to summarize it other than to say that we moved in the direction of the things that we're looking at. Sort of a very simple way to put it.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, in terms of taking the faith or the spirit element out of it, that's a very good way of putting it.
And if you just think about it naturally, right? Like your eyes, as human beings, we're designed a certain way. Our eyes are in the front of our body, and we generally move in that direction, that towards the thing that we're looking at. It's just awkward to, be looking behind us and trying to move forward, right? Or looking to the side and trying to move in a straight line. It doesn't really work.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And there's a broader element to the to the to the direction or the choices or the decisions or the strategies that we design. There's a perspective that informs what we're doing that is somewhat encapsulated in the viable systems model, but it's more encapsulated in more of a spiritual perspective. And this is, Michael, where you'll probably resonate. So there's a Gheric's comment is really good. We're going in the direction we're looking, and the philosophy says if you look for things that you want to see in the world, the things that you want to see in the world will show up, and the more they show up, and the more you look at those things, the more will show up. And if you celebrate the showing up, even more will show up. If you and the more you put your attention or you look at those things, more of those things will show up. And in addition to the showing up, like in physical reality, you'll start to get insights, would be a good secular term, I think. Impulses is another one. Intuitional hits is a more spiritual
Mm-hmm.
one. You'll get guidance from, it doesn't matter from where right now, but we can talk about that in a minute, but you'll get guidance that when you follow that guidance, you'll be led to even more of the showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the key here is that this guidance or intuition or these impulses are aligned with what it is that you're focusing on, what it is that you're looking at.
You say more about that.
In other words, what it is that you're looking at, it's either something that you want or something that you don't want, right? And you could be thinking that you're looking at the thing that you want, but you're actually looking at the thing that you don't want.
Yes.
And oftentimes people do this because they're like, well, I wish I had this and I wish I had that, and they may think they're looking at what they want, but they're actually looking at the evidence of the lack of what they want, which means they're looking at what they don't want. So generally, that is going to be sort of the first sign of whether you're looking at what you want or what you don't want is how you feel, your emotions. If you feel good or if you feel bad. Now, when regardless of what it is that you're looking at, whether you're feeling good or you're feeling bad, whether you're looking at what you want or whether you're looking at what you don't want, you're going to be, your intuition, let's say, is giving you impulses at any given moment that will allow the thing that you're looking at to unfold through your actions in that moment. Even if not fully unfold, right? If you're cooperating in the unfolding of the thing that you're holding in that, in your mind's eye, or the thing that you're focused on at that moment. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. So can you give an example? So the first thing you said, the what you want and don't want, that can get really confusing for people. So do you have either a personal experience in your life that kind of illustrates that, or I can give an experience in the context of our ecosystem, a very,
Mm-hmm.
very
So
prevalent
people,
one.
I think an interesting example is people do these affirmations all the time, where they say things like, you know, I'm a successful, wealthy person, or, you know, whatever,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But oftentimes the mind will, you know, if you don't actually believe this, right? If you're trying to convince yourself that this is true and you're just not there yet, and you're trying to convince yourself of this thing that you don't actually believe,
Yeah.
then your mind is going to jump in and say, like, no, you're kidding yourself. You're telling me you're wealthy? That's not true. Look at your bank account. And so it'll, you know, it's um, oftentimes we have a lot of resistance to believing or even just focusing on the thing that we want, right? If I wanted to be something and I don't believe that I am it, then I can't focus on being it.
and
Pretty
there and
straightforward.
yeah, and then you don't see evidence of the thing that you're wanting to be. So
Right,
it's
exactly.
so
Yeah.
so let's use it. So I'm gonna give a Copiosis social group example, because there were a couple of these that happened in the social group that clearly illustrate what Gheric was saying earlier. And for those of you who've just joined, you're watching the live stream, please feel free to ask any questions, because this is complicated what we're talking about, and we're happy to
Oh,
answer any
before you
questions.
give those examples, by
Yeah,
the way,
yeah,
let
yeah,
me
yeah.
tie this to something scriptural.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
since we're kind of touching on these different perspectives here. Um, one thing that comes to mind is this verse. I forget the actual scripture um,
Michael can probably help us
numbers and
there.
everything, but
Yeah.
as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Right. In other words,
Yes.
if you want to be a good person, if you want to be virtuous, you're not going to get very far if you believe that you're an evil person.
Yeah.
If you think of yourself as evil, you will do evil things.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's actually a good entry into to the example I wanted to give from the social group, and there's been several of these. So so we've had conversations with people. Gheric and I have had conversations with other people in the social group where those people are looking at, to use Gheric language, looking out into the world and seeing evidence that their belief, for example, that Bill Gates is trying to kill a bunch of people and own all the real estate and do a bunch of other nefarious things. These people are looking into the world and seeing evidence that that is true. And they're not feeling good that they're seeing that evidence. So their emotions are telling them something really important, and yet they keep on looking that in that direction. And when they look in that direction, they see more evidence, even though more evidence telling them that what they're looking at is there's more to look at in terms of what they're looking at. And then they make conclusions that get them really hooked into that path of looking in that direction, so hooked they become that it's almost impossible for them to pull themselves to look in a different direction, because it kind of gets mesmerizing. You get to see, so like literally in the phrase of mesmer, the name mesmer, you get hooked or hypnotized into seeing that evidence, and you just see more and more and more of it until you're convinced that this is reality, and it is for you. We we prefer to look in the direction of what we want to see, which is that Bill Gates is doing a lot of great things. He's doing his best, but he doesn't know everything that he needs to know in order to have the maximum success that he could potentially have. And so we do what we want to do, and we look in the direction of what we want to see, and we see the world and everyone in it as doing things that contribute to the world we're wanting to see. And when we look in that direction, we just see more and more of that. And the idea is behind this fundamental philosophy is, if you it doesn't take it only takes one person to do this, but if a bunch of people do this, then the world begins to shape and become, for those people who choose to see it that way.
I think there's some connections here between what you were speaking of with the people who get down these rabbit holes
Yeah.
of conspiratorial thinking that between that and a quite ancient philosophy called Gnosticism. And the Gnostics believed that there was hidden knowledge that most people didn't have access to, and that they alone could bring to the world. And as someone who is deeply involved in politics and in studying history, I will say that history is in fact replete with conspiracies. So it's not to say that that there aren't conspiracies happening as we speak. People in dark rooms discussing what we might deem nefarious things, but there's a difference between a well-researched, well thought out concept that can show something like that exists, and a tinfoil hat wackadoo mythology that gets built up that says that Bill Gates is trying to insert microchips in our vaccines, and I can name all kinds of things that I don't like about what Bill Gates is doing in the world, or what any number of people are doing in the world. But if I continue to delve down that rabbit hole, I will find it more and more easy. And since we're on YouTube, I'll mention that YouTube itself makes it quite easy and almost dangerous in a way, because the suggested videos next to a video are often lead people down these rabbit holes, and they come to believe that that's the only truth that exists out there in the world, and that everyone else around them, except for the people that are like red pilled or whatever they want to call it, don't understand this hidden truth that they understand.
So
and that's the kind of thing that can lead to things that we saw on January 6th, for example.
right. So I want to lean away from the more extreme ideal of conspiracy theory and acknowledge that what you said at the beginning of your comment, Michael, that there are indeed some backroom type deals going on all the time all over the planet. And the thing is, if you and you can find evidence of that if you dig a little bit. Uh, but our philosophy says that if you look at those things, it says a couple of things. One, if you look at those things, you're not going to feel very good, and how you feel is really important. We can talk about that in a minute if you want. But more importantly, if you look at that and you put energy, negative energy or positive energy into that, you're going to create more of that.
It's
Converse,
empowering it, in other
yeah,
words, right?
yes,
We're
yes,
making it bigger, right?
yes.
The more you look at it, the more energy you're giving into it. And it's not just that you're making it bigger in your kind of focus. It's you're literally giving it more power over you, and so it's counterproductive, right?
Yeah.
It's
It,
not to say that there's no need to sort of say that it doesn't exist or it doesn't happen.
right.
But it feels much better to say, yeah, but there's something much more interesting and much more powerful happening over here,
Well, and that's where
right?
I wanted to go with the third thing is
Yeah.
that there's a force, and I'm using that word specifically. There's a force that that causes everything to lean in the direction of, for lack of a better word, good. Um, Although there's no judgment value in that force, but good is the only word I can think of. Right is another one, but that's too strong. Um,
Well-being.
Well-being, that's a good one. Yeah. And if you and by looking for the positive things that are happening in the world, you connect yourself, or you align yourself to that force. And as a result of that, the people who are doing the darkroom deals, because they're doing those kind of deals, they don't have that kind of
Hmm.
connection. And so when you put your attention so that you are lined up with that force, then you have more leverage to create what you're wanting to see in the world than someone who's got a bunch of people in a dark room
Yeah.
somewhere trying to do something dastardly.
And it's pretty straightforward if you imagine, the nature of, you could say, things that are negative, or even you could say the nature of darkness. Um, it is self-destructive, right? It doesn't lead anywhere. It doesn't have any
Yeah,
lasting impact.
yeah,
Whereas things that are positive, they bring together, they create. There's expansion. There's forward momentum,
yeah.
right? There is just so much more happening there. Um, and so it's like there's almost no point in getting worked up over the things that are just, at some point, if they run their own course, they just fizzle out. There's nowhere else for it to go.
Yeah.
I think that
Michael,
that's
Michael,
something that,
hang
yeah,
on.
go ahead.
Can you hang on to your thought for just a second? It's 20
Absolutely.
after, so I just want to take the break because it's important that I make sure that people know who are watching live, and there's a few people who are watching live, that if you're interested or you have a yeah but or a question, please put it in the comment section because this is really important for people who are following Copiosis to understand, and it is a bit controversial. So we want to make sure we have the opportunity to respond to every comment that is made. Um, uh, in case you have a question that needs to be cleared up for you to follow along with what we're talking about. So, um, uh, KJ has said, I suspect that most people think of conspiracy as actual indifference. So we're gonna be looking for comments that are specifically related to a question or a statement of resistance about what we're doing, so that we make sure people understand what we're talking about. This is the Copiosis live stream. Feel free to follow us on all social media, and you can join our social group on Facebook if you wish, and we can further this conversation. All right, Michael, pick it up.
Yeah, so I think that something that was just said is important, which is that I think that people that focus on these, um, nefarious deeds that are being done by other people around the world, powerful people, what have you, people that we know their names. I think that the problem is that um, these people who are focused in this way, they don't think that they're doing something wrong. They think that they're doing something good. They think that they're doing something to try to better the world by exposing this. And the reality, though, is that as we've said here, you're spending so much of your day focused on these negative things that maybe they are really happening in the world, maybe they aren't. But you're spending time that you could be spending developing something positive that would eventually counteract or overwhelm whatever the negative thing is that's out there that you're trying to fight against. And so it's better that you bring attention to this positive thing that you're doing than the negative thing that someone else is doing. And to go along with what Gheric was saying about scripture, there's a scripture that comes to my mind, and it's one that I mentioned in my first live stream, which is that all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. All things means all things, including things that we think are nefarious, are
Yeah,
actually have been in history, and we can see this, have
yep,
been turned around against themselves
yes,
eventually.
yes,
Definitely. Yeah.
that's exactly right. Yes. So I want to take that was beautifully said, Michael. So I'm glad that you said it. So I want to take this to another level because the decisions that we make in copiosis are guided by everything that we're talking about, especially the impulse or the intuition or the guidance that we receive from this broader perspective that we're calling this force. And one of the most recent decisions is in the realm of finances. So for a while now, I've been I've been receiving guidance from my intuition as I focus along the lines of this philosophy to so I want to start over. So there's a belief that you cannot create something wholly new if you're trying to create that wholly new thing from the current thing's way of doing things and seeing things and thinking about things. And the guidance I've been receiving is essentially saying, Perry, stop trying to go after funding to make Copiosis happen. Instead, create funding from nothing. Create funding from nothing. So create it. And so anyone who has watched our 5-year strategic plan presentation will notice that in that plan we have plans to apply for grant funding and other sources of funds that provide grants to nonprofits, and that we were going to become a nonprofit. We're still going to become a nonprofit. But as I've started focusing more on that path and going after funding from those traditional means, my guidance has been telling me that is not the right way to go. That is the old way of doing things. And Copiosis and me are about creating new ways so that out of those new ways will come these new things like Copiosis. And so it's been a little hard for me, little personally challenging, but I'm leaning now, like Gheric is saying, I'm leaning now in the direction of that guidance, and what that looks like is no longer pursuing those avenues, but instead creating money from nothing. And creating money from nothing means expecting money to show up and looking at evidence where money is doing that, rather than thinking I have to go chase money down in order to fund what we're doing at Copiosis. So it's early in this process, but I'm already seeing lots of evidence of that happening. But to share that evidence right now, and this is the thing, that to share that evidence right now with the audience could cause the audience and myself to feel some yeah buts or dismiss or explain away the evidence. And so it's not productive for me to go in that direction. Instead, it's more productive from the standpoint of this philosophy to focus on these pieces of evidence with kind of a soft gaze, like not trying to hold tight to the evidence, not trying to squeeze more evidence out of the evidence, but to just let the evidence be there and allow it to become more. But I know that there are examples already in allowing Copiosis to unfold where this has already proven itself. I mean, the fact that Gheric and Michael are on this show with me is evidence. The fact that the people on the core team have come to the core team is evidence. The fact that we have already received some funding is evidence. And so there's evidence that the philosophy is working. And if my thought about it is, in standing in the evidence that exists, I will see more of that evidence.
Related to that, there's yet another scripture verse that came to mind just now, which is that faith is the evidence of things hoped for and the substance of things not seen. Or I'm sorry, it's actually, I think it's the other way around: substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. In any event, it's the knowledge that that you can be 100% certain about something that you might not have exact empirical evidence for in a scientific sense. That you can see something coming on the horizon, and it's not blind faith, it's informed faith, and we all sort of have to operate in that way in our normal everyday lives without realizing it. We operate on faith that there are things going on outside the room, even that we don't know about and can't see. Yeah. And if you don't have that faith, you get into a problem called solipsism, You can look it up, and you know that. You know, there are you know, conversations happening as we speak that maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe 50 years from now are going to resonate in such a way that they're coming into what we're building here in this space, and we don't get to see that. We're threads in a tapestry that's being woven as we speak, and we don't get to see how the whole tapestry comes together until much later, and often it's people that you know are living 100 years hence who look back at it and see this is what was coming and this is why it happened, but these people believed that it was coming and they birthed it into existence.
Oh my God, that's so beautifully said. Oh my gosh. So I want to talk, Gheric, tell me if you're not okay doing this and I'll change the subject, but I kind of want to talk, I want to talk about holochain and how that has come to us as an example of what Michael has just said, and as an example of what we all have been saying for the last 30 minutes. Is that okay, or should I use a different subject?
Let's talk about something else because I'm not sure where that's going yet.
Yeah, okay. So Michael, I'll use Clubhouse because it's another really good example. So um, Michael just said some amazing things, and they're 100% accurate. And there's tons of evidence with Copiosis that's proving that to be the case. So I had no idea that there was this thing called Clubhouse. And in fact, when so Clubhouse is like a part for the audience. Clubhouse is like a party line of the old days where people get on their phones. It's interesting that it's on the phones, but with new technology, they get on the phones and basically they listen to people talk about really interesting things. Um, and Gheric had gotten onto Clubhouse sometime before I did. And to be honest, when Gheric was reaching out to me trying to get me onto Clubhouse, I was poo-pooing the whole thing because I did not want to spend any time on my phone more than I already do. Um, but there were some amazing things happening on Clubhouse with regard to an accumulation of like-minded people, both in the spiritual world and the technical world and the startup world and all kinds of other different worlds that were coming together and having these amazing conversations, just like Michael was talking about. And these conversations happening outside of the room of Copiosis were coming together in a way that made perfect connection with what we're doing at Copiosis. And Gheric, I don't know how did you get involved in Clubhouse?
I think a friend just told me about it and I jumped in there, but you know, I've always loved having deep conversations with people. So it's funny because Clubhouse is literally that thing that I've been wanting for a long time, and it just appeared all of a sudden, and it was like, oh my God, this was made for me.
Exactly. And so Gheric had joined and started this group that's got a lot of traction in Clubhouse, and they've been talking about a lot of really cool things. And I believe through his connections on Clubhouse, he met with two uh, people who really resonated with Copiosis. And as a result of that, they just took it upon their own to talk about Copiosis all over the place. And then not just in Clubhouse, but out of Clubhouse. And then Gheric told me about these two people and invited me to Clubhouse. And when I joined Clubhouse, I was blown away by the breadth and the depth of the content, the conversations, and the quality of the people that were participating in this thing. And the more I began to participate, the more it seemed like you're saying, Michael, this perfect dovetailing of a conversation that I had no idea was going on and what we're doing with Copiosis. Now, I mean, Copiosis is talked about relatively frequently on Clubhouse without me, and I don't even think sometimes without Gheric being there. And I recently just got an invitation from someone from Clubhouse who wants to have me in his Clubhouse to talk about Copiosis. And so it's really this philosophy bears itself out. There, I don't want to say it's true, it just bears itself out that the more you put your attention on something, the more the thing you put your attention on is going to grow. And And that growth is kind of governed by this leaning towards the good that this force has a self-interest in seeing. And so this is why we don't at Copiosis vilify anything. We don't attack anything. We don't condemn anything. We don't we don't cause separation between ourselves and others by pointing to others and blaming them for the thing we think needs to be changed. We don't do any of that sort of negative talk, because we know that it's just much more productive to talk about all the good things that are happening.
For example, this plays out very specifically in the way that Copiosis is designed, so that it's not about taking away from anyone. It's about seeing everyone as part of the solution, including the so-called 1%, right? We see them as much as a part of the solution as everyone else. And so many of these other kind of philosophies or approaches out there, there's just a lot of tendency to blame people or to make people out to be the enemy, somebody that you have to fight. And our approach is we want Copiosis to be something that benefits even those people, that it makes their lives better, and it makes everyone else's lives better too, because there's no reason not to do that.
Yeah. And I think something there really dovetails with my own personal philosophy very well, which is that, here in Copiosis, we have, I think, struggled in some ways to bring on board people that would be from like sort of my political perspective, namely socialism, because socialism, while like the ultimate goals are very similar to what we're doing here at Copiosis, they are sort of creating or at least acknowledging a group of people at the top who are against them and are against what they're doing and are part of the sort of ruling class group of people who are driving the destructive capitalist system that we have. But at the same time, I am indeed a socialist, and I do draw from a lot of those strains. I'm a libertarian socialist in the sense that, I don't want statist solutions. There's another term for that called anarchism. Some libertarian socialists are more minarchist, but in any event, we don't want an overarching government doing this. We don't want like Soviet-style communism. And at the same time, as I am those things, I am also a theologically conservative evangelical Christian. And so I am actually quite pacifist in my outlook. I want non-confrontational means of achieving my goals. I'm not seeking to like overthrow the government or have some kind of frontal assault on things that I think are bad, because I think that itself is immoral and is generally immoral. I think that there are some circumstances under which you might think that there could be a moral just cause to defend yourself, but in general, like that offensive, I'm going to go in and just like kill all of the bad people. That's not a solution. That becomes its own problem. Because in order to maintain that, you have to keep killing people, because the people who you're killing, they're going to try to kill you back, and some of their friends are going to try, if they die, their friends are going to get mad. So, I would rather make someone who I think is doing something destructive in the world, I would rather bring them on board with my philosophy, and say, let's work together. If you can turn an enemy into a friend, then you've already won the war in perpetuity. And so that to me is the essence of real evangelism, is that you are turning someone who was an enemy into an evangelist themselves for your peaceful, loving ideology, and not trying to create enemies lists and eliminate those that you believe are doing harm in the world, because you are in fact eliminating them by turning them into an evangelist for this loving ideology. You're eliminating what they're doing rather than eliminating them.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've seen this proven over and over again about how violence just begets retributionary violence. It just doesn't work. And it's not in the best interest of the future to create the future from that kind of present. And so this is why we are really focused in Copiosis on being pacifistic is kind of a good way of putting it. Looking at what we want in a peaceful way and recognizing that what we want is peaceful and that there's a lot of evidence of that peace already. And that when we put our attention on that peaceful wonderfulness, we will see more of it as time goes by. And here's where, and at this point, well, it's 40 after. Let me take a quick break and just say this is Copiosis, this is live stream. You guys have seen this all before, this break part. Feel free to click on, we want you actually to really click on that subscribe button and hit the alert bell so that you are notified of any new live streams we scheduled and also any new clips that we send out. And then if you want to find out more about Copiosis, you can go to this website. I'm sure you've been there before. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, so we want to focus on the evidence we're seeing because more evidence happens. And so this is what I was going to say before the break. Many people look at what we're doing with Copiosis and they say, you guys, you're moving too slow. We don't have time to contemplate our navel. We don't have time to let the universe unfold. We don't have time to wait for the right opportunities. We have to do it now because the planet is ending and so are people. And this group is doing this to that group. And if we don't stop it now, there's not going to be any groups to do anything with. And our response is that the more we focus on the evidence that our work is working, not only will more of that evidence show up, but it'll show up faster. There's an accumulation or a momentum that occurs when you pay attention to what it is you want to see. Actually, even if you pay attention to what you don't want to see, that momentum will also occur. So you'll see more and more momentum of the evidence that you're looking for, which is one of the reasons why people get so impatient about improvement, because they're looking at the absence of the improvement they want to see, evidenced by more things going bad. And as they focus their attention there, more of that shows up. And so they get kind of panicky because there's more and more of that evidence showing up, proving that what they're looking at is becoming more. And so they get kind of panicky about it. And then they rush into impatience. And from impatience, as you all know, haste makes waste. So in impatience, you start taking action that you think is solving the problem. But as Gheric said at the beginning of the hour, the action that you're taking when you're impatient or you're thinking things are going wrong tends to exacerbate that which you think is going wrong, not create the thing you would prefer to see go right.
I think part of the problem that people run into is it's not like we don't have serious problems going, serious things going wrong. And the potential, ecological destruction, of course, is one of those things where it's like we have a ecologically imposed drop deadline to change the way that things are going on this path. But if you focus on the way things are going right now, and you focus on the potential for a dystopia in 10 years and 15 years and 20 years, if we don't do something about it right now, you're really focused on failure. you are creating the conditions under which that thing that you think is terrible will happen, because you haven't been spending every waking moment doing something positive to change it. And so if I do this a lot in my work as a canvasser. I point out to people who, at the door maybe say, is this thing that you're working on, can you actually achieve it? And I point out, well, you lose every battle that you don't suit up for. So you really have to assume, if you're going to do these battles, you have to assume that you're going to win, because otherwise you won't.
Yeah, there's a comment. We have a comment that came in, and I want to get to Kusanagi's comment. But before I want to respond to what you just said, Michael, because this is actually really true. And in race car driving, they train race car drivers that when they're skidding off the track, they train them to look in the direction of the track, because the tendency is that the car will go back on track if you're looking on the track. But if you're looking towards what you're careening towards, well, that's what you're going to end up hitting. And so it's so practical and so obvious, yet I think so many people miss it because of its practical obviousness. So let's drag in one of these comments. So he made two actually. So Kusanagi says, most things that we decided to be of value today had no value, no existence yesterday. And then he also, or he or she, they also said, this is what Isaac Asimov was getting at when he called science the ever righting of wrong. I think that last comment is really, really accurate, because that speaks to this force that has this tendency to move toward good or right, for lack of better terms. More value is the way that one person calls it, more value creation out of it. And Michael, your comment earlier about the nature of, how did you say it? I think you said everything leans in. You didn't say leans in, but everything is about creating. How did you say it, Michael?
All
The,
things
the
work out
scripture
for
verse
good.
is, all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Now,
Yes.
some of the folks maybe in the live stream don't believe in God, and you can substitute whatever you want to in there. But the idea there is very similar to the oft-used quote that the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice.
Yes.
And that eventually, that good wins out over evil.
Yes.
It's not that evil doesn't exist.
Yes.
It's not that we shouldn't be combating it in the way that we're envisioning combat. It's not creating an enemy. It's a creating a friend.
Yes.
So yes, absolutely, evil exists in the world. Absolutely, there are bad things going on in the world, and there are people doing those bad things. But they could be doing good things if we gave them the information that showed them that what they're doing is actually not just destructive toward themselves, but toward the rest of the world. I think that when we focus in that direction, there's going to be more and more people that will come on board. Not everyone will,
Right.
but there's another excellent quote. I believe it was Margaret Mead who said that we should never doubt that a small committed group of citizens can change the world, because indeed it is the only thing that ever has.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think one of the reasons why the arc is so long and it bends so shallowly over that time is because so many human beings are paying attention to the things they'd rather not see become more. And that's what drags out the arc. And it could arc shorter and more steeply if more people were willing to, as you say in your language, Michael, get on the side of God or be more godly, or in another less confrontational language for those who don't have that faith, just be more positive. It's so
Well,
simple.
I think that we can create a situation wherein it's more likely that people will do so, and that's, I think, what copiosis is all about. I think for those who share my theologically conservative evangelical Christian faith, or even theologically conservative faith of any kind, there is this notion that most people are not going to accept that, and the notion that the path is narrow that leads toward righteousness and few follow it. But we can see in history that there were world systems that made it easier for people to be evil. Slavery, slaveocracy, feudalism. There were other kinds of systems that made it a lot easier for people to lord over and to be evil in very destructive ways. And our system, capitalism, does the same in many respects, but in other respects, it's better than the systems that preceded it. Mm-hmm. And so there can be a next system, a system that makes it easier for people to choose the right path because we're incentivizing them to do so. And so the problems that are coming about because of the system that we live in and the technological advances that we've made that make it easier for us to kill each other could be turned against that those technological advances could be turned toward solid, good, life-affirming purposes, and they just aren't right now because all the incentives are in the wrong direction, or a lot of the incentives are in the wrong direction.
And I think that when we see what everyone in Copiosis is attempting to do, and then others in other ecosystems that are aligned with what we're doing, I have to say that there's the pressures of slaveocracy, I think you called it, and feudalism, and all of history that has caused human beings to get where we are, is causing humanity to ask for something more than what has come before. And out of that asking can come that more when people line up to receive what is being asked for. And I think that's what we're seeing with Copiosis and Clubhouse and the Seeds organization and the evolution of not cryptocurrency, but ledger-based technologies as we've gone from blockchain um, to there's something Ethereum, and then into Cardano, and then into Holo, the decentralized version of blockchain type technologies, blockchain type. TC asked a question. Let me just throw this in here real quick and offer um, Michael or Gheric to answer. So TC says, are we each creating our own reality? I believe he's saying this in response to this idea of looking at what we want to create and seeing the evidence of it, and then seeing the evidence become more. Either one of you want to take that?
I mean, I do believe that we are, and at the same time, we are also co-creating with one another. And that's, it's the fun part, is we get to share with one another the things that we're doing, and we get to build together the world that we want to see. I think I wanted to tie this to what you brought up about this narrow gate that leads to life, and there's few who find it. It's the thing is that there only needs to be a few. The reason why is that's how we progress. That's how we have problems, right? We see problems in the world. There's a lot of people that are kind of stuck looking at the problems. They're focused, kind of obsessed with the problems. And then there's just a few that are not looking at the problem anymore. They've had enough of that. Now they're looking at the solution. They're looking for the solution. They're in the solution space somewhere, just exploring. and maybe they don't find the solution right away, but they're still in that space, right? And as they explore that solution space, they get closer and closer to finding the right solution, to finding the path, that narrow path, right? And this is just kind of a cyclical pattern that it's like it's this pattern that reoccurs at every scale, and nature's doing the same thing, right? Um, it's this exploration of um, of the solution spaces, and we're doing this all to collectively. We're sort of, some of us unintentionally, some of us intentionally, but even those of us who are focused on the problem, we're only adding to the clarity for those that are looking in the solution space already. Um, so it's yeah, and so kind of this is basically what stigmergy is all about, right? We talk about stigmergy a lot at Copiosis, but essentially it means that all you need is just a small handful of people to stumble upon the solution, stumble upon that narrow road, that narrow path, and suddenly you have a trailblazer, you have a path now, right? You have a few broken twigs, a few more people find that path becomes even clearer, and then suddenly everybody's taking this path because now it's clearly the more valuable path that leads to more well-being.
Yeah.
And at some point, we're all down that path. All the entire planet, all of humanity has now found that path. They've now traversed that path, and now there's a new, uh, sort of unknown landscape at this point, right? And that new unexplored landscape, it's an entirely new paradigm with an entirely new set of problems that have never been even conceived, right? And then the whole thing repeats. You have an entirely new paradigm, new landscape. You have new people that are focused on the problems in this new paradigm, and then you have a small handful of people that are like, "Hey, let's try to solve this. Let's look for a new path." And they're the explorers, they're the pioneers, and just a small handful of them are going to find that new path forward into a new paradigm.
Yeah.
I
And
think
that's
that's
fine.
important.
That's
I think that's
beautiful.
important
That's so beautiful.
to recognize, because there are so many people who really right now in the paradigm that we exist in, the capitalist paradigm that we exist in, who are just living in the reality that others have built for them, and they're very focused because they're struggling in that reality, just on their day to day, like, how am I going to get the food, water, shelter that I need for today to survive, and for my family and my loved ones. And so what Copiosis is allowing, as a system, as a new paradigm, is for more people to be able to create realities for more people, and positive realities.
Yeah.
Because it's not just this one small group of people at the top who make a lot of money, who are sort of creating the reality for others in an outsized way. But it's everyone
Everybody.
having access to that, and creating positive realities both in their own space, but because they have access to that greater potential for life affirming wealth, not just amoral wealth that we have right now, but a net benefit reward, for the work that they're doing. There's a potential there for more people to come on board and create better realities for more people.
Couldn't have said it better. And that is a great time to, great words upon which to end the show today. Uh, Thank you so much for those who have watched live. We've had quite a few people come on and off. For those of you who are watching the recorded version, you can still make comments or ask questions, and we will respond to your questions after the show. You have been watching the Copiosis live stream. We've been talking about Copiosis live stream. We've been talking about our fundamental philosophy. This is probably going to be one of our anchor shows because it really lays out what the how of what we're doing in very specific terms, the how underlying the everyday action. But I really want to thank Michael Vick for being on the show today, and Gheric for being on the show. You totally get it. And I love you both for seeing the value of what we're doing and participating in the ways that you're participating. And for the rest of you who have watched the show, TC and KJ and how do you say that guy's name? Kusanagi, thank you so much for being on the show live. And we'll see you all next time on the next live stream. Have a good afternoon and good rest of your weekend. Bye, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you all.